Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the missing case of Lena Chapin, who lived in Dent County, Missouri. This case also looks into the murder of Gary McCullough. Lena was part of a very large family. Her mother was Sandy Clem, and Lena was the second oldest of 5 sisters. She also had a total of 3 stepfathers. Lena was just 20 years old when she went missing in 2006. And this case has also been covered by a series recently, and this has piqued a lot of social interest. I'd just like to give my normal disclaimer that I mean nothing against the people I'm talking about today. I've just gathered these facts from the internet and made this video for educational purposes. So as a child, Lena very much inserted herself into the boss role. She would often tell her sisters what to do. Even though she was outspoken and a little scrapper, as one of her sisters described her, she was very well liked. She was a very bubbly and fun person, and she always spoke her mind. Now, to get to the information surrounding her going missing, we really have to go back to when she was younger and what actually happened to her to really understand the facts of this case. Now, Brandy was the eldest of the 6 sisters, and she described her mother Sandy as being a really good mum growing up. She always worked to provide for her children. Sandy went on to marry her second husband, Albert McCullough, sometime in November 1994. He actually described her as a people pleaser. She always knew what to say, and her children really did love Albert. He took them to sports classes, took them to gymnastics. He did lots of stuff with them over the years that they were married. And he got really close to the children, and they got really close to him. Now, for the first few years, Albert and Sandy were really happy. That was until she started messing around with another man. And it actually turned out that this other man was none other than Albert's brother, Gary McCullough. Now, from what I can gather of Sandy, she was very much a person that loved the men's attention, and then when she actually got them, she got bored easily and she moved on to the next. So that is what you'll find throughout this case as I go through it. Sandy left Albert on the 22nd of May in 1996 and moved the family back to Missouri to be with Gary. So this would be the girl's stepfather number 2. And Gary was very different to Albert. Gary had a working farm, and he really did make sure that he involved the girls within the workings of the farm. The girls had to chop up wood, learn how to feed chickens, cows, horses, learn how to milk the cows. Basically, they had their own chores, and once these were done, Gary would treat them with things like ice cream. He really enjoyed being around the kids, and they really enjoyed being around him. The girls have even stated that Gary did so much for them in their life, and he taught them so much, and they're so thankful to him that they learned how to be disciplined and independent, and that was all thanks to Gary. They lived with Gary for 3 years, and Sandy married him in December 1996. Gary was, by all accounts, a really good guy, and he simply got mixed in with the wrong person. Like I said before, Sandy was very much a person that jumped from man to man. So she jumped from Albert to Gary. And once she had Gary, again, she got bored of him after a while. She met the younger Chris Klemp. Chris came from a family that had quite a bit of wealth. They owned quite a bit of property. So Sandy began having an affair with Chris in March 1999. When Gary found out about this affair, obviously he was very upset and he was very hurt. And around about the same time, he also found out some discrepancies to do with his checkbook and some checks that had gone out that actually Sandy had signed, because she did have access to the checkbook, and there was some suspicion surrounding that. And Gary did decide that he was going to divorce Sandy. And this is when, after only a couple of months into Sandy's new affair, that on the 11th of May 1999, Gary disappears. Albert described his brother as a very hard worker, and he would never really miss a day of work. So after a couple of days of Gary not even turning up for work, he knew straight away that there's something wrong. This wasn't like Gary's character at all. And the people who actually knew Gary have been known to state that instead of looking for Gary, presuming that he was missing, they were looking for a body. They knew something really bad had happened to him. This fact was actually reiterated when he took his gun over to one of his friends, Jeff Allen. He took his gun to Jeff's house and he asked if he could leave it there because Sandy had actually threatened that she was going to kill him with it. Now, Gary always unloaded his gun after using it, so he told him that it was a good job that the gun was unloaded because Sandy actually put the barrel into his stomach and pulled the trigger. His friend checked the gun, cocked it open, and actually found a shell inside, which did have powder in it, so it was a live shell. Now, Gary was so shocked and surprised and hurt to hear that this gun was loaded, and she did in fact try to kill him. It was so lucky that the shell was a dud in a sense and it didn't go off. This would be the last time Jeff saw Gary ever again. I personally do not understand how Sandy could have been so brazen as to just tell Gary that she wanted to kill him and actually just poke the barrel into his belly and try and shoot him. And I can't comprehend how Gary actually felt in that moment, knowing that she did actually try to kill him. He initially thought that the gun wasn't loaded. His own wife tried to shoot him. It was 2 days later, on the 13th of May 1999, when the police were informed by Robert McCullough that Gary was missing. And Robert McCullough was in fact Gary's cousin. So obviously the police went down, they spoke to Sandy, and she informed them that Gary was supposed to be going to Diamond in Missouri to pick up some fighting roosters. The policeman asked, "Are you going to file a missing persons report for your husband?" She said, "Yeah, I suppose I should do that." And she did in fact file a missing persons report. So at this point, Sandy has threatened to kill Gary, even tried to kill him, but the gun didn't go off. And after he actually went missing, 2 days later, she had still not reported him missing. And the only reason she did was because the police asked her if she was going to, and I guess she felt pressured that she should do. After all, that's what a wife would do. Generally, they would have reported it sooner than that. Sandy was very suspicious. After about a week later, the police returned to Sandy's home with a search warrant, and she was not at all pleased that they were there. When they searched the house, they didn't find any belonging of Gary whatsoever. He had no clothes. It was as if he had never even lived there in the first place. It had all been cleared out. They did, however, find a checkbook that belonged to Chris Klemp, which was Sandy's new boyfriend who she was having an affair with, whoever he was at the time. And after incredibly 2 days into the case, Chris Klemp actually moved into the house with Sandy. Now this was very, very odd, as I'm sure you guys would agree. The police did ask Sandy to take a lie detector test, but she looked at them dead in the eye and said to them, "If you find a body, I'll take a test." To me, at this point in the case, I am in no doubt that Sandy killed Gary. And she was so brazen and so bold in, if she had killed Gary, the fact of how she disposed of his body would mean that he would never be found, because saying that to a police officer, she must have been very confident in what she was saying, basically. So what did she do to Gary's body to enable her to be this confident? Obviously, the police wanted to question the children, and Lena, who was 13 at the time, was very hostile towards them. She was very close to her mother and was very defensive of her. Like I said before, Lena was very much the boss role of the family, and whatever she told her sisters to do, they basically did it. And Lena told her sisters to keep quiet and not mention anything about Gary going missing. Sandy actually made her children lie for her their entire lives. And an account from Brandy said that their girls all came home from school and Sandy met them at the front door. She said to them, "Hey girls, there's a cat in the field that's had kittens." So of course, excited, most of the girls went. But Brandy, however, the eldest, she had said that she had cows to milk. So she waited out on the porch for a little while, asking her mother if she could come in. She had to get her stuff to milk these cows. So eventually she said, "Right, I'm coming in, I have to do my chores, I'm coming in to get my stuff." And when she opened the door, she saw her mother with her hair tied up, which she never normally did, on the floor, scrubbing with what seemed like bleach water. It was just really odd. And that night she sat down the children and basically told them a story that they had to stick to, and that Gary left to go to Diamond for the roosters and you haven't seen him since. That night Sandy told Lena not to let anyone out of the rooms, and Lena even fell asleep in front of the doors to obey her mother's orders. But as young as the girls were, they knew something was off. And one of the girls does actually recall seeing her mother and Chris struggling with something large that was wrapped up in a material, plastic, something like that. And she could have sworn that it was Gary. She could even see his boots, the normal boots that he wore, sticking out at the end. But, like I said, she was young. This scared her so much that she never actually spoke about it until she was much, much older. Lena was kind of the glue that kept all of the family together. She told her sisters that you can't talk about what happened to Gary because they'll end up splitting us all up and putting us all into the care system, and we'll never ever see each other again. So obviously none of them wanted that. They didn't speak about what happened to Gary. She really did try her hardest to keep them all together. The family moved around a couple of times, and Sandy actually married Chris whilst they lived in St. Louis. Lena lived with her mother at the time, and she became very distant. She would often stare off into space as if she were thinking about something, contemplating something, and then when somebody asked her what was wrong with her, she would wipe away her tears and say nothing and carry on as normal. She really did become lonely, and it was because she was holding in something that she really needed to let go for all of these years. Because basically holding on to a secret as big as it was for so many years was just eating her alive. She just had to tell someone. So Lena did. She confided in one of her boyfriends at the time, and her boyfriend told her, you need to give Gary's family closure. You need to go and tell somebody what happened. So she decided that she was going to tell Albert, which was Gary's brother. She was very fond of Albert. As I said, he was a stepfather for a good few years, and she really did think a lot about him. So this was on the 26th of June in 2003 when Lena met up with Albert. She was actually 17 at the time. Albert actually recorded the entire conversation, and he did say to her, I want to know who killed my brother. This was when Lena finally let out the secret that had been eating her for all of these years. It was Sandy, her mother, that killed Gary. Going off the recording that Albert actually made of Lena's confession in a sense, Gary was actually sat on the sofa in the living room eating scrambled eggs when Sandy came in and shot him 3 times, 2 or 3 times, she wasn't exactly sure, in the head. She then wrapped him up in plastic. She bound it with baling twine off the hay, where she then dragged him to the bedroom. When her children got home, she ordered Lena to stay in the bedroom. She obviously didn't want Lena to see Gary, but she had actually already confessed that she'd seen him because she looked through the door. She then later took his body to the truck and left. Albert obviously questioned as to where his brother's body was. Possibly there was some evidence on it that they could find to get Sandy done for his murder. However, Lena replied that there's nothing left. Gary's body was burnt. Anything that was left over after the body had been burnt was then separated into separate piles, into buckets, and they actually drove around the entire land, spreading his remains in different locations, basically so that he would never be found, which is why Sandy had so much confidence telling the police officer, if you find a body, I'll do a lie detector test, because she knew it was practically impossible for them to find anything. Lena did help her mother, and at the time she was the only one that knew what happened. She was only a child at the time, doing what her mother told her to do. What else was she supposed to do? And not only that, Sandy was clearly a violent person. She was very unpredictable. Who knows what she might have done to Lena if she had not done what she said. Albert and his family took this recording to the police, and they believed that they did have a really strong case to try and pin Sandy for Gary's murder. But then Sandy actually found out about this, and she lawyered both herself and Lena up, and they then convinced Lena to walk back her confession, which she did. And this was just so frustrating. They pretty much had as close to a confession as they were probably ever going to get. She describes how he was killed, how the body was disposed of, and yet they couldn't do anything about it. Brandy has stated that she had so many questions for years. Was her mother really capable of murder? And in my eyes, one day she would find out. So one day, Lena actually told Brandy everything. She told her how her mother had killed Gary, that they burnt a body and disposed of it. And the next day, Brandy actually got into a fight with Sandy. And she told her how she knew everything. She knew everything about Gary and she was going to expose her. She threatened to call the police and tell them what she'd actually done. Sandy stared at Brandy and told her to get in the truck. With Chris driving, Sandy and Brandy went for a drive. This was in the middle of the night. It was pitch black outside. Chris then stops and gets out of the car. When Brandy looks over her shoulder, she sees that a gun is pointed to her. And Sandy does nothing. So she jumps out of the car and goes to the front of the car, basically directly in front of Sandy. She's crying, screaming, she's frightened to death. Sandy just stares off into space. She doesn't even look at her own daughter. Brandy was she was so frightened, she just didn't know what to do. And the only thing that she thought that she could do was check to see whether her mother's side of the car was open. And she ran over, she opened the door, luckily it was open. She flung her arms around her mother, thinking that at least he wouldn't be able to shoot them both. And she cried to her saying, "Please don't let him hurt me." To which Sandy did actually reply, "Don't hurt my baby." And so Chris lowered the gun. They all got back in the car and they went back home. Like I said, it seemed that Brandy found out that night just how dangerous her own mother could be. Looking into this case, I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. She let a man, her boyfriend, hold a gun up to her own daughter. It's just horrendous. Both of the girls didn't mention it again because of course they didn't want to risk their own lives. On the 3rd of November 2003, Lena actually had her son Coulter. Now Lena was so excited. She really wanted to provide for her son. She got a few jobs, probably more than she should have and could handle. But this meant that Sandy offered to look after her son while she worked. She really wanted to provide for him, which is why she worked the hours God could send, basically, to give him the best chance in life. Now, Sandy had always been obsessed with having a son. She tried so many times and she ended up with 6 daughters. So she obviously really adored her grandson. Now we come around to the year 2006. Everything seemed to be going good for Lena. She found a role model for her son and they were planning on getting married. And Lena was moving in with a boyfriend. She essentially wanted to become financially independent from Sandy. And this was kind of the ultimate threat for Sandy. After all, Lena knew far too much. What would stop Lena from telling the world what she knew about Gary and what her mother had done if she was no longer dependent on Sandy? And now it would seem that because of this, there was a kind of a rising tension between her and Sandy. And when a lawsuit was filed from the McCullough family, that's when it reached its peak. The McCullough family decided that after it seems that nothing would be coming of Gary's case because there was no evidence, no new leads, they had this confession of Lena, which obviously she then backtracked. So they didn't really, even though they likely knew what happened to Gary and they basically thought that they did, they had no way of proving it in a sense. So because of this and the fact that nothing would come of Gary's murder, his family filed a civil lawsuit as it was the only thing they could do at this point. They alleged Gary's wrongful death and that Sandy and Chris had murdered him with Lena as an accessory. Now, the idea behind this and the hope was that Lena would actually gain immunity for her role in it if she basically testified against her mother. Gary's daughter filed the suit and the court summons were given out. They found Chris, they found Sandy, but Lena was nowhere to be seen. And obviously they needed to deliver these summons, so they asked Sandy where she'd gone. Her story was that Lena had run off to Florida with another man. Robin, which was another one of Lena's sisters, actually went to the house she shared with her boyfriend, Jason Byron, and asked where Lena was. He told her that Sandy had basically told him the same story, that she went to Florida and she ran off with another guy. It was actually on Valentine's Day, the 14th of Feb 2006, when Lena went missing. Sandy tried really hard to convince the children of the story. She basically told them that Lena had told Sandy that she didn't want anything to do with them and she was always saying bad things about them. But Brandy was actually spending quite a lot of time with Lena and They spoke about everything. So if there would have been a new man in her life that she ran off to Florida with, she would have told her. But like I said, she was planning on getting married to Jason, so why would she just run off? Now, Lena went missing and her son Coulter was left behind. And Lena's sisters really do believe that Lena would have never, ever, ever left her son Coulter behind. She would not have gone to Florida without him. She absolutely adored her son and she would do anything for him. It was also stated that she had left without any of her belongings. Her photos, which she was really into, she took a lot of photos of everything and she had them everywhere. And they stated that these were just put outside, basically until they rotted, until they were useless, waiting for Lena to come and collect them, which obviously she never did. The sisters waited, hoping basically, but Lena never called. She never turned back up. There was just nothing. When they told Albert that Lena was missing, his initial thought was Sandy. Like I said before, Lena knew too much, and Sandy wasn't going to have that. Robin actually spoke to the police and said that she knew her mother had done it once again, and she knew that Sandy had done something to Lena. Robin began putting up missing posters of Lena around Salem, and she later found out that Sandy was actually paying one of her younger sisters to take them all down. Why would a mother of a missing daughter pay to have her missing posters taken down? It just screams guilty to me. Robin actually called her mother and told her, I know you've done something to Lena. And she actually vowed to be the one that found information, whether it was on Gary or Lena, and she would make sure that Sandy would rot in jail for what she did. Brandy actually told the detectives that Lena was missing because she had made this confession tape. And with the trial coming up, Sandy obviously got scared. Sandy knew that if Lena wasn't around, she couldn't be convicted for Gary's murder. And that if Lena had gone, she would have actually got custody of her son. And like I said, Sandy always desperately wanted a son. She had 6 girls. She desperately wanted Coulter to be her son, as strange as that sounds. And by all accounts, she actually made him call her mum, I believe. And she was really obsessive and possessive of Coulter, trying to take over control of him. I really do believe that she actually thought she was Coulter's mother. Obviously, with Lena out of the way, she would get this wish. And as soon as Lena went missing, what did she do? She filed an abandonment charge. And of course, Lena wasn't there to defend herself. And Brandy stated that Sandy knew Lena wasn't going to turn up to court. So, of course, she got custody of Coulter. In July 2013, Judge Carr Woods heard the wrongful death lawsuit and would not allow Lena's confession tape into evidence. When it came to the trial, all of her children took to the stand to implicate their mother in his murder. Brandy's testimony was very strong. At this point, she wasn't tied to Sandy whatsoever, and she was completely independent. She stood in court for 2 hours and basically poured out everything that she'd been keeping in for so many years about her mother. And it's said that even some of the jurors were seen wiping away tears as Brandy made her statement. The verdict of the trial was basically that Sandy and Chris knowingly took the life of Gary, and they were ordered to pay $7 million to Gary's daughters. But to this day, the family have yet to receive anything. Sandy divorced Chris in 2014, obviously keeping up with how she jumps from man to man. It was just the kind of thing she did. She apparently remarried after that again, and she still has custody of Lena's son Coulter. Brandy has actually stated that she will spend the rest of her life trying to put her mother away for what she did to her sister and her stepfather. And she will never stop trying to find Lena. 2 of the sisters, Brandy and Robin, were actually given permission to search the farms where Sandy and Chris lived. They initially searched the farm where they lived when Lena went missing, and she stated that her mother was not stupid, and that Lena, if something had happened to her, she would have put her in a place that was really hard to get to. There was actually speculation of there being a well on the property at the time, but when they went back, there was nothing there, it had been filled in. So she believes that Sandy had actually filled in this well before she moved. Could this have been where Lena was buried? They also checked the other property that they moved to just a couple of months after Lena had gone missing. They got in this equipment to check a set of 4 trees, to which, when Robin was being showed around the property by her mother, She told her a story that didn't really correlate, something about burying her dog by the 4 trees. But Brandy had actually said that she previously told her that she'd buried her dog at the old house. So she found this very suspicious, because why was she now changing the story about where the dog was buried? She thought that maybe Lena was buried there. So this equipment was able to check if there were any displaced earth kind of underneath the trees, and that would give them an idea as to where they needed to dig. They searched this area for an entire day but found nothing. To this day, the bodies of Gary McCullough and Lena Chapin have not been found. Personally, I do feel like reading all this information, I'm pretty certain, and especially with Lena's confession, that Sandy did kill Gary. And that is without a doubt in my mind. And I also do believe that she did murder her own daughter. In my eyes, and many other eyes, her sisters, her family, I really don't believe that Lena would have just upped and left, especially about her son, without any other things. Like I said, she seriously adored her son. He was her pride and joy, and her and her boyfriend were about to get married. Why would she just up and leave all of that, all of the good that was finally happening in her life, and run away to Florida? And with the timing of everything, I really do believe that Sandy actually killed her. Sandy had a lot to gain from Lena going missing. Obviously, she wouldn't be convicted of Gary's murder, which was a big one, but not only that, she also would get Coulter, which was her dream son that she'd wanted for so many years. I find this case really, really sad. I really will not understand how any mother could ever hurt or kill their own child. It's really beyond me. Obviously, this is my opinion, but my theory is pretty much in agreement with Lena's sisters. Let me know what you guys think happened to her. Do you actually think she left everything and ran off to a new life? Or do you think something else went on? Something more sinister? Let me know in the comments below if you wish to leave your theories on the case. Like I said at the beginning, this was part of a series recently streamed on TV. So I am actually hoping that this may provide some tips and get some more information on this case. Maybe somebody out there knows something. Anyway guys, that's all I have on the cases of Gary McCullough and Lena Chapin. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye!